I was born in Barnet, Vermont, in July 19th, 1933, in a brick house with a local doctor and a local neighbor assisting him, lady. I'm the younger of three siblings. My older brother, Howard, passed away. My sister, which is 3 years older than me, has had a serious stroke in the last year. She lives in Florida and has with her husband for several years. I went to elementary school in the town of Barnet, Vermont. Well, I'm very proud of the fact it was a two-room schoolhouse. When I started out in the first grade, there were either 5 or 6 members in my class. By the time I got to my graduation in the 8th grade, I was the sole one, so I take great fame in being the valedictorian in the 8th grade. In the year 1774, John McLaren, a good Scotsman, got on a ship and sailed to New York, along with a group of other people. When he got to New York City, he went and he met with a Colonel Harvey, who was also from, I guess, Scotland, and they purchased tracts of land in Vermont. Harvey, I think, had previous land up there, but he bought some more, I think. So then they took, and they got together with a group of others, and they walked from New York City. Well, they walked, and they rode horses, and they canoed up the Connecticut River to Bellows Falls, Vermont. I believe it is Bellows Falls, where they got off, and they marched by horseback, I guess, to Barnet, Vermont, which was an unincorporated town at that point. It was right on the Connecticut River, and bordered what later became the state of New Hampshire. They camped in the woods on the north side of a pond that they named Harvey's Lake. It was really a pond, but it's always carried the name Harvey's Lake and still does today. And then when the spring came, John went and located his plot of land and started clearing it. This was in 1775. He got a call, summoned or whatever you will call it, to join with Colonel Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys, who was then struggling with the British forces. It turns out, as to how long he was in, I'm not sure, but he was in a rather short period of time. The records got burned. I believe all the payroll records got burned for that period of time. So nobody, but it's in the town history that documenting that he did serve with Ethan Allen in that struggle. He then married a girl that came over from Scotland, and they had a son named Alexander McLaren. We go down through the generations after that. Alexander stayed on the home farm there, and he had a younger brother named William that spun off and bought another plot of land in Barnet, and he in turn got married. He married a girl by the name of Hasty, Euthymia Hasty, and they had 4 children. No, I'm sorry. There was William, and there was William John, which was his son. William John is the one that married Euphemia Hasty, and And then they had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. The oldest boy was Hazen McLaren. Then they had 4 years to the day after my father was born. He was born on December 18th in 1900. 4 years later, on December 18th, 1904, my uncle Arthur was born. They were all born at home, of course. And then later followed, there was a daughter that was born, Marguerite McLaren, who later married Howard, Missouri, who's the one that went to University of New Hampshire. Okay, my mother and father got married, and they had 3 children. Okay. Later on, the first one to pass away, of course, was John McLaren, and he was buried in the Barnet Center Cemetery. Thereafter, every generation for 7 generations has been buried there, with the exception of 2 of my cousins who were in World War II, and they're buried at the Veterans Cemetery in Randolph, Vermont. So Mary and I will be the 7th generation. I bought a stone for my son and his family, so if they go through with it, they would be the 8th generation. So it's very easy to trace the history of the McLarens. Okay. From there, I was fortunately lived in a town that didn't have a high school. There were several private academies around, and so you might say we had school choice. So I chose to go to St. Johnsbury Academy, which is noted for President Coolidge. President Coolidge went there for 1 year. He had been to Vermont Academy and wanted to go to Dartmouth, and apparently they didn't feel he was qualified, so he took a prep year at St. Johnsbury Academy. I went up, played football for 2 seasons there, even though I had a serious injury when I was 11 years old to my head, and I got quite a scar that's still there. I had severe headaches for 2 years every time I went out in the sunshine because I had a concussion. And I was told never to play contact sports. However, in my junior year, my friends taught me to going out to football, which I knew nothing about. I was a farm boy, so I was in pretty physical shape, but I went out late. They were already scrimmaging. They'd been practicing and exercising for a few weeks. Okay? So I had to get my equipment, and I didn't even know how to put it on. So they issued me equipment. They said, okay, here's a hip pads, and here's shoulder pads, and we ran out of rib pads, but you don't need rib pads. Okay? And then they said, oh, well, we don't have any of our modern helmets. We got one here that you can wear. It was one of those leather ones. If you ever watched football back in the 1890s and 1900s, that's what it was. But they said, unfortunately, we don't have a chin strap that fits it, but you don't need a strap. Okay. So, okay, I go out on, they're already scrimmaging out there, and the first team is running the ball. So the coach, which I had in PT, knew me, so he said, McLaren, get in there at left guard on defense. I didn't know where left guard was, so they pointed out, so I get in there. And so the first play, the offense runs the play right at me. Well, I'm telling you, all I could think of was I had 3 or 4 guys on top of me. And I got out from under the pile. They looked at my helmet. It was off about 20 yards to the right. So I went and retrieved my helmet. I learned then that football was a rough game. I did manage to be on second team that year and played in 4 of the 7 games the next year. Well, the last session, training session of the year, we had a lot of seniors who were graduating, so the coach tried us out different positions. So just before it was the last play of the day before darkness set in. He said, "All right, McLaren, get in there at fullback." I said, "Fullback?" I mean, I was one of the lightest guys on the team. Said, "Yeah, get in there." So I got in there, and they called the play, which I knew. So the ball was given to me straight by the center. So it came back. It was supposed to be a soft center, but it came back like a bullet. Okay, it was one of my friends, and he was just clowning around. Well, anyway, I managed to catch the ball, tuck it in, and I knew where I was supposed to run, and I ran, and next thing I know, I got 5 or 6 guys on top of me. I climb out, and I'm still kicking. Well, I go back, and a week later, it's posted on in the coach's office, a starting team for next year. He's got me in at fullback. I said, "Coach, I don't want to be a fullback." No. I said, "Look, I had to kick to get out from under him." He said, "I know." He said, "that what I liked about you was you gained 10 yards and you were still digging in for more." Well, luckily he took another job and became coach of a high school in Minnesota that had never played football. He was a good coach. He conditioned you. We didn't get injured, I'll tell you that. But his team won 10 straight games, and they were undefeated the first season. Well, we had a new coach come in. So our senior year, we had an even win-loss. We didn't do well. The final game of the season was against our rival for over 100 years. That's a private school, Linden Institute. They had some good talent. It was at their field, so they didn't have room for us, so we had to sit in the bus for our game session before the game and at halftime. Unfortunately, our coach was new, and unfortunately, he had an alcoholic problem. That particular day, it was quite noticeable, and we could smell it. So we got into the game, and at halftime, we were trailing 13-0. We sat in the bus, and the coach started ranting and raving, and finally, the captain of the team, a tackle next to me, Danny, said, "Coach, I've taken over." So he conducted the rest of the session, and we went out, and we ran the first play. The kickoff was us. And I did make a key block on a halfback, and he scampered 94 yards, ended up on the 6-yard line. Whistle. Offside. So the play came back. Coach said, "McLaren, hit the bench." So I went to the bench. He sent in a guy who was a good football talent. He's a couple of years younger, but he was good. He later tried out for the Pittsburgh Steelers, got caught, got injured in the preseason, and got caught. But he did later play for the University of New Hampshire, and I think he still has a record for freshman year for the most tackles in the game. But anyway, so on that particular game, though, getting back to that game, I finally said, "Coach, if you were watching the game, it wasn't me that was offside." "Oh, it wasn't? Get back in the game." So, but anyway, we ended up losing the game 19-0. Enough on that football. After my senior year, I wasn't known for being in many activities. I did had participated in track my junior year. My senior year, I didn't because I decided I wanted to go to college. So I had a part-time job right after school got out, right after football season got over, working at the A&P grocery store. And I wanted to go to college, and I decided to go to a military college. I applied and got accepted at Norwich University, which is the oldest private military school in the country. So I went, and along with two other members of my class, also got accepted there and went there. I graduated there. I soon learned that military life was rigid. We had a new president of the university that year. His name was Lieutenant General Ernest Harmon. He was an armored commander, and he was sort of the right-hand man to General Patton. He is acknowledged as quite a leader in several books for winning campaigns, particularly in Africa and in Europe. He was a tough guy. We'd have chapel in the armory, which was our athletic building. About every third word from him was a curse word. But anyway, so I decided after I went the second year, and then I decided, no, I wanted to be a business administration major, and they weren't known for the business courses. They were primarily an engineering school. So my second semester, I applied to several other colleges. I got accepted at several, including Boston University, University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, among others. There were several others. And I applied to the University of Vermont because that was a state university. General Hammond didn't like it because several of our class had put in for transcripts of the grades. So he put out an edict, and anyone that applied for a transcript of the grades had to appear before General Caldwell, who was the general from the Marine Corps, retired. If he wasn't satisfied with their answer, they had to appear before him. Well, I was one of the few that didn't satisfy Colonel Caldwell, General Caldwell. So I had to see General Harmon. He called me about every name in the book, okay? Weakling, can't take it, and all that stuff. And I said, General, you can call me any name you want, but I'm still leaving. Well, he wasn't happy, but so I got out and worked road construction that summer to earn more money because, I needed money, and they worked long hours, and they paid hourly, so. And I was planning to go to the University of Vermont in the fall. So in August, I come home from work late. My father said, you got a letter from the University of Vermont today. I said, well, it's probably my tuition bill. So I opened it, and it was twice what I proposed. The legislature apparently had failed to renew the tuition grant for the in-state students. So my father said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know, but I got an uncle who graduated as an agricultural major from the University of New Hampshire. Can I borrow your car tomorrow? So I called my supervisor and told him I wouldn't be to work the next day, and I took my father's car and I drove to Durham, New Hampshire. Nice sunny day like it is. This is the day we're talking now. Just a beautiful day. And I drove into that town. It was lined with elm trees on the main street. I just fell in love with the campus. So I drove by, and I had joined Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity at Norwich. So I wasn't too anxious to live in a dorm again after 2 years of military training. So I drove by, and I noticed they had a house, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, on the side street. So I drove back to the administration building and walked in, and the receptionist said, can I help you? And I said, yes, I'd like to speak to the director of admissions. Now, luckily, I had an extra transcript of my grades, which were pretty good. I'd made Dean's List 2 out of the 4 semesters at Norwich. And so she said, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, I don't. Well, it was a warm day, and the building didn't have air conditioning. It had fans, and His door was open right across the hall, and he evidently heard me. So he came out and he said, "Come on in, young man." And I gave him a transcript of grades and said, I'd like to come to the University of New Hampshire. And asked him a little bit about the business administration courses. He told me, so that satisfied me. And so he said, "Well, looking at your grades, I see no problem with being accepted." I said, "Sir, there's one more thing. I noticed you have a chapter of SAE on the campus. Now, is there somebody, I'd like to talk to somebody from that house." So the dean says, "Yes, as a matter of fact," he says, "Professor Johnson lives right on the same street as that." He says, "Let me give him a call. Maybe he can show you the house." So I said, "That'd be wonderful." So I went to the house, and it housed 40 members. And he said, I said, "Well, who's the president?" He gave me the name, and I said, "Can I have his address?" So he gave it to me. It was a young man in Massachusetts. So I went home. I thanked him, went home, and I saw the dean and said, "Okay, fine, I'm coming. Hopefully I'm going to live in the fraternity." So I went home, wrote to the president of the fraternity. He wrote back and he said, "Fine, they'd love to have you. We have 2 or 3 brothers that flunked out, so there's an opening." So I ended up going to moving into the fraternity, and for some reason I knew a lot. SAE was known as the singing fraternity, and I knew some songs from Norwich at the party that they didn't seem to know, so I introduced those because it was the football season, and we always had the best party on football games afterwards. So they 2 weeks I'm into it, and they make me social director. So from there, later on, I became the secretary of the fraternity, and the next year, I became president of the fraternity. We had about 60 members. Okay. Now, when I was president of the fraternity, there was spring weekend coming up, and they had the queen contest for the queen of the spring weekend. And so I offered the faculty members who were going to judge them our house for a tea and to invite the girls and interview them there. So they did. Among the candidates was a young lady, but she had been nominated by another fraternity by the name of Mary Alexander. Well, she was redhead, strawberry blonde, and she was quite attractive young lady. So I said, "Well, yeah." So when she wasn't being interviewed, I went over and talked to her a little bit, and I found out she lived about 35 miles from my hometown in northern Hampshire. Well, I also found out she had just joined Alpha Chi Omega, which was directly across the street from our fraternity. So those 2 things excited me. So I decided I'd like to invite her, but a few weeks went by, and my fraternity brothers seemed to have a date with her every weekend, different brothers. So unfortunately, I had gone an extra semester, so I got my Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration in January. I also, at that time, received a commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army in the Signal Corps, which I had not trained for. But anyway, so before we left, I managed to get one date with Mary Alexander before I went home. I went home. I received notice 2 months later to report to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey for basic training. So this was in March. I had a date with Mary when it was the 100th anniversary of my national fraternity. And when president, I had volunteered the all the Northeast chapters, which we had 11, they decided to bring it to one fraternity, and I had offered our fraternity and got it accepted. So I made some planning. It was a dance. And so when I drove from my folks' house on Friday, I got there, and one of my fraternity brothers said, you're going to go to the dance Saturday night? And I said, well, I hope to. And I got to get a date. And he said, well, who are you going to ask? I said, Mary Alexander. He said, no, you're not. I have a date with her. So that killed that. So I was supposed to go home on Sunday. I didn't obviously go to the dance. So I called my folks and said, I'm going to stay over another day. So I called Mary and said, how about date tonight? So we went and had a couple of beers. So I told her that I was going to be going to service, and so she said, okay, fine. So so when I got inducted into the service, I got the call to go to Fort Monmouth. I said, well, I'm going to go to visit my friends at SAE and the university. So I got a chance to see Mary once more, and then I headed out. Well, the fraternity brothers stayed overnight with him in Scarsdale, New York, and then went to Fort Nava, New Jersey, where I was for 13 weeks. 3 of those weekends, I got passes and came to the University of New Hampshire and dated Mary. At the end of the 13-week program, we was told you can you have some say in where your next assignment may be. There are 5 areas of assignment that need Signal Corps officers. One of them was Fort Gordon, in Georgia. Fort Watuka in Arizona. Usera, which was Europe. The Far East, which was Japan. And then there's Hawaii. But he said, as far as Hawaii, forget Hawaii. They're all full. They only have 16 lieutenants in Signal Corps, and they're full. So I put down for Usera. So they posted on the bulletin board, and a couple of days later, I looked. First one is Fort Huachuca. Next one's Fort Gordon. Next Fort Huachuca, Gordon. Oh, they were just going back and forth. Finally, one Fort Lewis, Washington. Wow, there's hope. So we got to the middle of the alphabet. The L's, Fort Huachuca. I looked at my name, which was next. Usera. Okay, and then another Fort Gordon or something. And then they picked 4 names to go to Usera. One to the Far East out of 30-some-odd candidates there. And so I said, I wonder how they did that. They're supposed to be very sophisticated. So I went back and looked, and I said, you ever see a dartboard? They went right to the middle and just back and forth, one name and forward and picked it. So anyway, I ended up with a 10-day leave after my basic training. So I went back to Vermont, and fortunately, Mary was home working that summer in Lancaster, New Hampshire. She was working as a waitress at a summer resort hotel. So I saw her practically every day, and I think 2 nights before, I asked her to marry me. And she accepted, and I went and bought a ring, borrowed money, and bought a ring, and presented it to her, and so forth. So with that, my brother drove me I had to report to Fort Dix for transfer to Europe. There was an air base with military transport right next to it. So my brother and his wife agreed to drive me, and they asked Mary if she'd like to go along. So we made the trip to New Jersey. My sister-in-law insisted that Mary was going to sleep with her. So we had a one-night stop on the way. So we got there, and they left me. I sweated it out in over 100-degree temperature for 4 or 5 days at Fort Dix, checking every day, several times to see if my name was posted. Finally, it was posted for me to fly to Germany. So I took a match flight from Germany. We went to Newfoundland, and then we were supposed to land in London, but it was foggy, so we didn't. They kept going, and we landed in Frankfurt. And I had gone from 100-degree temperature and was in a summer uniform, and I got to Germany. It was foggy and rainy and cold. It was like in the 30s. Boy, we practically froze in our summer uniform. But we stayed overnight, and then they put us on a train. Those of us that are going south. So I went on a train to Karlsruhe, Germany, where I was met by a German interpreter, and he picked me up, and he took me through fog and rain, and we drove over to Neureich Kaserne, where I was shown a army barracks which nobody was in. There was no heat, and there was no hot water. And they said, tomorrow morning, you got to meet with Colonel Custer. I said, Colonel Custer? Yeah, yes, but it's spelled with a K. Oh, okay. So the next day I reported to Colonel Custer, and at the 516th signal group. He says, all right, says, let's see, you're a bachelor. He said, we got a company down in France, the 125th. I think you're due to go to France. Well, I don't want to go to France, but somehow I persuaded him that I didn't think so. Okay, so I don't know how I convinced him, because generals don't usually take back talk. So I said, all right, so I'm going to send you over to the 29th over to Grzuski Barracks, 29th Naval Battalion. They're a construction outfit. Support all the communication, the wireless communication, wires and cable, underground cable, for USARA headquarters and USARA in general, plus all the artillery ranges. So the next day I reported to Colonel Leah, and the first thing he just says, let's see, you're a bachelor. We have one company in France with Lieutenant Brown, okay? And just then I was lucky, because they had a first lieutenant, Spencer, who was a company commander of C Company. He called for captains, but they had a shortage of captains, so they had a lot of first lieutenants acting in that capacity. So he says, no, I want Mac. Everybody called me Mac. So he had a close friend that graduated from Norwich, and I knew him at Norwich. He's a couple of years ahead of me, but I knew him. And Lieutenant Spencer was from Maine, and so was this guy that he knew from there. And he noticed that I was from Vermont, so he thought we might bind or something. So, and he was a bachelor. So with that, they said, okay, you're going to C Company. So I lived in BOQ along with where Spencer did. It's right across from the Officers Club, where we could get our meals and so forth, and also an occasional alcoholic drink. But it was in a village that they had built for the American officers and non-commissioned officers, the Iowans. It was called Paul Revere Village. So I lived, as I said, I lived in the Paul Revere Village. But while I was in the service in Germany, I got there in June of '56, and they immediately, the company went out on maneuvers. I was a platoon leader in C Company. But I couldn't go on the maneuver because I had to be cleared for top secret, because we did all the communications, wire communications and cable communications for use for headquarters, which was basically the predecessor of NATO. After a month, I got cleared. I was surprised that some of the neighbors had complaints about my antics as a teenager, but I did get clearance for top secret. And so I went on my first maneuver, and it was in Bernheim. And I got up there with my Jeep driving, and I'm driving around, and I noticed this Russian Jeep. And there was a captain, a Russian captain, and a sergeant. And they had cameras, and they were taking pictures of all the military equipment going in and out of the maneuver area. Basically in at that point. And so I ran into this lieutenant who had been around. He was the first lieutenant. And I said, "Can they do that?" And he says, "Yeah, they can do that." I said, "That doesn't seem right." And a few minutes later, he said, "No, wait a minute. I read a recent memo." Or no, not a memo, because in the military we call them edict or orders. They said, "No, we're supposed to stop and call the counterintelligence division, and they'll come and get them." So I said, "I'm with you." So he had a Jeep and a Jeep driver. So we took our two Jeeps and we went the Jeep in so they couldn't move. Well, the captain, he was furious. He could speak perfect English. The driver could speak English, but it wasn't as pronounced as you'd swear that the other guy'd been educated in England. Anyway, he was furious and took down our names, which were on our fatigues. So I said, "Well, I guess I don't want to get too close to the water." Anyway, if he gets away. But he kept complaining that this was not right. They had the right to do that. In the meantime, the other lieutenant immediately called the CID, and they said, "Okay, hold them. We'll be right there." For some reason, be right there turned out to be an hour and a half. In the meantime, we're going through all this bi-verbal commitment with luckily we had 45s on our hips, so they didn't argue with us too much. So anyway, when the guy from the CID got there, he said, "You shouldn't have done that. They have that right to do that." Said this could be an international incident. Well, with regard to that, I never heard another word on it, other just sort of an interesting day. While I'm on maneuvers, I was writing to Mary back and forth. She, 2 or 3 letters a day usually, and they sent me on maneuver to Czechoslovakian border, where Hohenfels, and I was there for 6 weeks. We were repairing underground cable. And I got a letter from Mary, and she said, "I'd like to come over in the fall." Well, I couldn't answer for a few days, but I finally, by letter, she had cablegrammed me. I'm sorry. So I wrote a letter and said, "Fine, come on over." Yeah. Well, I went back and I had to make arrangements for a wedding and everything. So I was lucky. There was a warrant officer in our headquarters that he and I got along fine, and I said, "What do we have to do?" "Well, first of all, you got to be married by the Germans. And then we do have a chapel here, and we have a Presbyterian minister, the chaplain, and he could marry you, and you could have a reception at the office. So I said, "Okay, it sounds good to me." I said, "Set it up." I said, it seems that we decided she was coming over in October. So she was coming over, I think, on the 10th of October. So I said, it's Saturday, that Saturday's the 13th. See if you can set up the wedding for that. Well, the Germans had come to find out only on Saturday. They only married Americans twice a week, and one of them was Saturday, and they quit at noon. I had arranged for my best man to, he was a roommate of mine at Norwich. He was stationed in Germany, and he came, and he was going to be my best man. Luckily, he was dating a German girl, so he could speak a little German. So, anyway, Mary arrived in Frankfurt. I borrowed a car and met her in Frankfurt and drove to Karlsruhe, where she stayed with another fraternity brother of mine from Norwich, Jack Lucido, who later died in Vietnam. Jack was in the Signal Corps also. So after getting back, she stayed with them for 2 or 3 nights, and then came the wedding day. Well, as I said, the Germans quit. We had an appointment with them about 11 o'clock. So we get there, and they said, "No, you got to have this stamp and that stamp, and you got to pay so many marks and so on." So with the help of my best man, we managed to get these stamps on, and it became about 11:30 or so. So the Germans start the wedding. It's all in German. All we had to do was say "ja" every once in a while, and he'd motion sit up, stand up, or sit down. And so neither one of us understood a word. Finally, he quit and just takes off. And so did all the other Germans around him. I said, "I wonder where they went." My best man says, "I don't know, I'll find out." Seems they were taking a lunch break, early one. Well, they were going to quit at noon, and I had a wedding planned at the chapel at 2. So I said, well, he managed to talk him into coming back when we finished the service. So then we got married at 2 o'clock we'd had a rehearsal the night before, and by the minister. And then we went to the officers' club, where there were about 30 or 40 officers and their wives that attended the service, okay, from the battalion, mainly. And they attended the reception, which consisted of champagne and cake. So then we were going on our honeymoon. Luckily, my best man had offered his car, because I hadn't taken my car overseas, and I didn't have one yet. So I borrowed his car because I had the rest of that whole week. And I went to Stuttgart, Germany, Mannheim. Well, first we stayed overnight in Stuttgart, Germany, at a German hotel. Well, just there, and I said I need a room. Well, the only room they had was a small room. So I said, "We'll take it." So we took it, and there wasn't a bed. There was a horsehair couch. So that was our wedding night. We slept on a horsehair couch. Well, the next day we took off and went to Munich and Stuttgart, Munich and surrounding towns there. And I had other classmates from St. John's Free Academy that were stationed there. And one couple from UNH. So they had come to the wedding, so we visited with them, and then we went back on the Saturday. Well, luckily before the wedding, I happened to have a few beers with the major in charge of all the housing for officers. And come to find out from him, there was a waiting list for housing. He said, "Don't worry, Mac, I'll put you on the list." So I got back, and he said, "Okay." I called him in. "I got 3 places that you had to get a choice of." So we looked at 2 of them we didn't like, but finally we took one on the 3rd floor. It was a walk up, but it was ironically South Carolina Strasse. So we lived at 2F South Carolina Strasse for the balance of the 2 years that I was stationed there. And later on, probably in the early part of 1957, I'd been sent to the artillery range, which is located on the Czechoslovakian border, to do some repair work on the underground cable. So we were there for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I guess. But anyway, when we got there, they'd been there maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and I said, well, we need some supplies back from the home base, so I sent the sergeant and a PFC, I think it was. No, it was a corporal in PFC, with a 3/4-ton truck, and we said, go back and get those supplies. You got 3 days. You'll take a day off when you get there, and then come back. Well, I'm out in the field working 3 days later, and I get summoned to appear to the headquarters. And I get to headquarters, and they say, we got a call from the CID up to the Czechoslovakian border. They are questioning the defection of your 2 troops. So you better get up there and see what's going on. So I went up, and they wouldn't really let me talk to them. I guess so they quizzed them for about 4 hours. They were convinced they were trying to defect because they'd run out of gas right on the bridge on the Danube River, and supposedly the Czechoslovakians had machine guns trained on them. Well, the boys had been drinking a little beer in the fields, and they missed all these signs. There were signs everything was kilometers there, but probably every 5 miles or so, within 15 miles or so, of how close you were to the border, how many kilometers. They seemed to not see them or something. Anyway, so they finally released them after 4 hours of questioning and convinced, I guess, that they weren't trying to defect. But they were completely sober, boys. They had been drunk by the time they got through with them. So they said, all right, they're in your hands. You discipline them. So what am I going to do? So I go back and I said, all right, you're commander of the company area here for the duration of the time we're here. Well, there wasn't any place to go anyway. Later on in the year of 1957, I was attached to the 1st French Army down in a town. We were going to have maneuvers with them, and we had to run our cable lines through their switchboard, the French switchboard. So they attached my platoon. So I had about 40 or 50 men that I took down there, and we lived in tents for a period of time. So this seemed to be very good, and so I said, well, I don't want the guys getting in any trouble, so Sergeant, why don't you, I noticed a couple of pubs, German pubs, why don't you just take them in the evening in a 2.5-ton truck, take them in and let them have a few beers and then bring them back here, after they've had a few beers and so forth. That way we'll cut down the desertions, Everything worked fine. The only really problem we had was one of the boys did get in a little trouble. I forget what it was, but 2 of them did. So I made them dig a little deeper on a pit we had dug in the forest there to bury all of our garbage, So right in the middle of digging it, 3 Germans appear. One, it turns out, was the Burgermeister, which was the mayor of the local city. The other one was the Forestmeister. He was in charge of the forest, and we were in the forest area. And another one was the game warden, whatever burger they called him. I don't remember the term. And they were very concerned that we were going to damage the roots of those trees and so forth. Well, I managed to talk to them and get them convinced that there was no harm, and we were done digging and, we took them down. But if we had, what happened over there was, if the Germans felt you damaged the tree, they made the American government pay for the lumber that tree would have produced 10 years hence. Later on came the 100th anniversary of the 29th Signal Battalion. Well, we had an S4, and he said, I think we should have a good party. He was the captain. And so he said, well, I'll get several wagons of beer. I don't remember how many thousand kilos of beer that he ordered, but it was substantial. And he said, I think we should let the guys get their German girlfriends and bring them if they want to, and all the officers and their wives will have to go to tent. It's mandatory. So it was down on the Rhine River, on the beach. So we had a nice day. Everything was going fine until about 2 o'clock in the morning, when I wasn't the company commander. I was the platoon leader, but I get a call from my company commander that he had just got back with a deuce and a half, bringing back 30 GIs from destroying the city of Rastatt. It seems that they had gone down there because they knew after the party they didn't have passes. They could get away because there were no American MPs. So what they did was first they wrecked a beer house. German police got involved. The Air Force, the Canadian Air Force had a base down there. Their APs got involved. They arrested them. They only got part of them. The others went to the jail and broke them out, so they all got broken out of the jail. They had a jailbreak. And so they finally rounded him up, and they called him, and he had to go down and get him. Well, they drew up all kinds of court-martial orders and summaries, and I was appointed defense counsel. Well, luckily, they tried them 2 at a time, so I only had 10 court-martials in a month. But we had to go to 10 different. There had to be 10 different judges on these court-martials, so I had to go all around different outfits, these juries. Managed to get 2 of the guys off at the end there. Otherwise, they were all good. So then the worst thing was, we had a company in France. They transferred it up and brought it home. It was commanded by a First Lieutenant Charlie Brown. We always kidded him about his name, but he was a graduate of Texas A&M, which is like a military school too. Afterthought, Charlie Brown became a 3-star general later in life. But while he was there, here he is. So he drew up this thing. So the colonel, I won't mention his name because I shouldn't probably. But anyway, he called me and said, Mac. Everybody called me Mac, all the officers. Mac, I know you're the defense counsel. I don't want you to defend this sergeant. Wait a minute. No, okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting confused with that story. No, so everything went fine with those court-martials. But when Brown brought his troops up, immediately one of the soldiers, the sergeant, went AWOL, absent without leave. And he was gone for 3 days. The MPs finally caught him. He was in an off-limits area, but they caught him, but he got away without his boots. And he managed to get back to the concern where the MPs were waiting for him and gave him his boots. Anyway, so he was brought up on all kinds of charges. The colonel called me in and he said, I want your stripes. I want to send him to Mannheim, the stockade for 6 months. Okay, I want everything. Don't give him a good defense. Don't defend him. Well, that really irked me because that was The colonel's job was just to make sure that it was a fair court-martial. The guy had a fair defense, and everything was fair and above board before he set it up to youth room. Well, I got muddling about it, and I told my West Point friend, he outranked me. He'd been my company commander when the rat started to bit. And he said, "You're absolutely right. He should not do that." I said, "How would you like to defend him?" So he agreed to. I said, "I'll help you." So I was sort of a sub-defense counsel on that. I had to get the colonel's approval, get a letter from the accused requesting him, and then taking it to the colonel to get his approval for this lieutenant to defend him. So I got the letter from the sergeant, got him to sign it. I took it up, and I went in and saw the adjutant. I said, "I'd like to see the colonel." And he said, "Well, he's not here." I said, "Where is he?" He said, "Well, he's TDY, which was allowing, he got allowance, and he was on leave at a bowling tournament up in Berlin." Well, I said, "Who's doing his job?" He said, "Oh, Major Brim." Well, I said, "Oh, good. I didn't need to see him." Well, Major Brim and I had a few pops at the officers club over the years. He's a good buddy. So he said, I need to appoint the counsel here, but this sergeant wants this lieutenant to defend him with me assisting. Well, he said, "What's he doing?" I said, "They got him teaching a few classes. He's due to go back to the state next month. So they've relieved him of all other duties. He just teaches a few classes here and there." Well, okay, so he okayed it. I felt sorry for the poor lieutenant that was the prosecutor, because he did an excellent job. All they could do was fine him $15. The colonel was so mad that we had to meet every Thursday with him at a command coffee call. All the officers. He didn't speak to the other guy that defended him until he went home. He had his goodbye party. He didn't speak to him. And he didn't speak to me. And finally, 2 months later, he came over and one of those coffee calls, put his arm around me and says, "Mac, I didn't like what you did in that Sergeant Brown case." I said, "Well, with all due respect, sir, I didn't appreciate your actions." That was it. And we came home. We both had flown over, and you could come home. And friends of ours from West Point had gone home, and he had the nice cruise home. Mary says, "Let's go by sea." I said, "All right." So, well, it was in February. Unfortunately, it was rough landing out. Oh, 10 days of awful weather. We had a 3-month-old son. Our son had been born at Heidelberg Hospital in October. And he was sick the entire thing. He had a ear infection. So we had to go, Mary had to take him to the dispensary every day. And then with the time change, she couldn't get a bottle when, they didn't keep up with the changes in the time. And, so it was kind of a madhouse. Then we arrived at New York Harbor. Well, you got here a day early. You can't land till tomorrow. So we waited a day staring at the Statue of Liberty before we landed and got discharged. On arrival to the States, I got out and I found that I had arrived in the middle of a recession. So I wrote to 30 or 40 companies and couldn't get a job. So I finally created one. I took a job as an agent, set up an agency, just writing life and health insurance in the hometown of, well, where I went to school, St. Johnsbury, Vermont. Well, that was difficult because there weren't many people there, and I was fighting a lot of competition from companies that had been there established for years. So I did okay, but after a year and a half, I decided to quit. So I left, and I got an interview with a alumni, not from New Hampshire, but he was an SAE nationally that had a headhunting firm in Manhattan. So I got an appointment with him. So I went to New York City, the big city. So I get there and I meet with him, and he seemed nice, but he said he'd try to help me. He took my resume and so forth. That evening, I called another fraternity brother who was in New York. He had been from New Hampshire, and he asked what I was doing. I said, I'm looking for a job. He said, look, I'm changing jobs. He said, my old job is open. The other job was working with casualty agents, but to sell life and health insurance, which I knew, because I'd just been in that. So he said, I'll set up an appointment because they're looking for somebody. So the next day, I had an appointment the next day in White Plains, New York, with the 29th, no, not the 29th, with American Mutual Liability Insurance Company. And I seemed to pass the interview pretty well, but they said, well, you have to meet with our psychologist. He's in Manhattan. So I stayed overnight there, and next morning took a train to Manhattan. Got there and met with this guy in Manhattan. He was a psychologist. And come to find out, he owned a farm in New Jersey and grew vegetables, and he sold those wholesale. And well, I had done a little bit of that in my early days with my folks, and so he found out. So it was supposed to be like an hour interview. Well, at the end of about 3/4 of the interview, he said, how would you like to join me for lunch? I said, well, fine. So we went to lunch, though. I was with him like a total of over 2 hours. In the meantime, White Plains is wondering what happened to me. So I get on the train, go back, and I had passed the psych test, and so they offered me a job, and I said, well, I don't think so. Everything's fine except the salary. I said, I've got a wife, and at that point we had a second child. I said, two young children, I got to rent an apartment, and I know it's expensive here. So I got to have a little more money. So they agreed to pay me more money, so I took the job. And over the next, I was with them 20 years, but over the next 6 or 7 years, we moved 5 or 6 times throughout New York State, in White Plains first, Cornwall, Syracuse, where we became active in the Trinity Church with a young group, okay, and particularly with the minister and his wife, Reverend Hill. They were young. He was a young priest. So from there, I still was a Presbyterian, though. I hadn't joined the church. I just supported them and everything, and we ushered and helped out some, but then I got transferred to Massachusetts. So the first thing we did was meet. We needed to know where the dump was, so we went and we saw it was on the same street was the church, and next to it was the rectory of the Episcopal Church. So we stopped to ask direction. They showed us where it was. And I met the priest and his wife, and so he said, we just, this is the first, we were a mission church. This is the first year of operation as a parish. So you're welcome to join us, okay? They got small membership, and we'd love to have you come. So we got a little active in the church a little bit. By they first had to have a vestry and elect deacons. So we went to that meeting, and somebody from the floor nominated me for the vestry for a 2-year term. We had 3 vestry members, one for 1 year, one for 2 years, one for 3 years, and then a senior warden and a junior warden. So I win. So I got up and I said, well, you people don't seem to understand. You just put a Presbyterian on your vestry. I said, but I checked your Constitution and you can't impeach me. So also, they had also put for 1 year a Roman Catholic. So anyway, so it's kind of interesting. So I served on the vestry for 2 years. Mary taught in a preschool that they had. They had a preschool, so Mary was one of the assistants in the preschool. She did that for 7 years. Anyway, after 2 years, I got off the vestry, and we had a new priest come in, a young priest and his wife. He said, he came to me soon after, we got to know him and so forth. He said, Hazen, I'd like you to do something for me. I'd like you to head up an outreach committee. He said, no, an inreach committee. He said, what I want you to do is, we've had, when they were a mission church, they had a few members that had left the church and had come back. I'd like you to get 2 or 3 members and go visit them and see why they left and what we can do to get them back. So I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I asked for volunteers. I had 25 women volunteer. So we started by having the meetings at our house, what we were going to do. Well, we did visit them, and we managed to get one couple back out of about 5 or 6. Okay? And they were still members when we left that town. But then he came to me and said, Hazen, we're a very fast-growing town, which we were, much like what's gone on down here in South Carolina. A lot of people moving into town now. They're moving out in the city, and like you to head up an outreach committee. I said, well, what do you want to do with the outreach committee? Well, find out where they go to church. If they go to church, I don't want to raid any other churches, but and invite them to visit us, our church, and so forth. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went and I said, so I had 2 committees. So I said, okay, we're going to split in half. So I just told them, you're on the inreach and you're on the outreach. So we met the same night, so different rooms in our house. So we went out and we contacted all the real estate agents, found out what people moved into, where they lived, got a list of them. Went and got the records from the deeds and so forth. Who was renting and who, so forth. So then we went out in groups of 3 or 4. 3 or 4 groups went out and we contacted these people, invited them to come in, and I think we tripled the membership at the church in 2 years. After that, Mary and I, after that, I got off the committee because I got transferred to another town, and I was just made a manager. I had to hire all the wages and so forth, so I was busy at work, so I had to give up. Mary and I conducted just ushering services, basically. Mary continued at the preschool until they made the public kindergarten. So they made it in public. Then she became an aide to a teacher in the public school. Mary retired in 1999. I had already retired, and they'd done miscellaneous part-time jobs. So we decided, we built a house in the meantime for retirement in Vermont on land that was once owned on my father's back farm. Well, we decided it was too severe in the wintertime, so we started coming to, well, it was invited by my brother and sister who had both moved to Florida to come to Florida. You got to come to Florida. Well, I went down and visited 2 or 3 times, but I didn't like it. They didn't like my answers. So anyway, I came back, and I had been to Myrtle Beach when I was in ROTC advanced training. I was trained by the 82nd Airborne for 6 weeks of basic training. So on a 4th of July weekend, a group of us had driven down the end of the 4th of July weekend. So I learned a little bit about Myrtle Beach, and I sort of liked it. So they said, well, what don't you like about Florida? I said, too many old people, and I said, I got young people of all ages around me, and I said, there's not enough to see. I said, I want you seeing things, it's all gone. So what are you going to do? So they didn't like it, but anyway, we rented for 1 month to come to Myrtle Beach, and then we built it up over the years. We got up to 6 months, you know. The first year we were here, I don't think we went to St. Stephen. That was 99. I think it was 2000. Well, we thought they had a 10 o'clock service. And then they had just changed it evidently to 10:30. So we went and got there at 10 o'clock, and there was one other woman there in the narthex. And so we got to meet with her and found out she was from northern New York eventually. And we had lived in New York, of course, for 7 years. So we got talking to her. Her name was Helen Rapp. So Mary said to Helen, we got too much in common. We got to be friends. So anyway, we were, and we became close friends to her and George. Okay. Then we started coming to the church, coming to church regularly. And when we were here, and after we bought down here, we moved here permanently in 2007. We had scouted the area, and we found a place that I liked, a small community. Reminded me somewhat of my view of Vermont from the window that I'm sitting at. So we bought there. And so we started becoming a little active in the church. But while we were snowbirds, I became involved in Habitat house building. Our church joined with a black church, and we built a house for a black couple. And I remember I got the cousins that went to the Presbyterian church. 2 of them come, and they helped volunteer, so they worked on it too. But anyway, I worked on the church. I think was involved in building 12 houses overall. I worked on the first 5 houses with a crew. Worked quite a bit on the first 2 or 3. Then I had moved, so I was further away, and so I didn't work as much. And then finally, we became involved with more churches, and as they got involved, they didn't seem to ask for us to volunteer as much. So I got uninvolved there. So worked on that. A lady, I believe a lady and her husband from church volunteered to buy new pews and new carpeting for the church. So I helped removing all the pews from the church, which were later sold to various churches, I understand, and I helped build the carpeting. We didn't become active in the rummage committee. We did help out on 2 or 3 sales, but where we lived, it just was not conducive to us go every Tuesday morning. So we have been But we did become involved in ushering, and Mary and I ushered for quite a few years, okay, until we became both of us a little unstable on our feet, and we decided it was time we just couldn't do it because of our elderly state. The church meant a great deal to me, but more so probably Mary. Mary was a cradle Episcopalian. She was, from the time she first went to church, Sunday school, and all the way through. I was brought up as Presbyterian, so there wasn't all that much difference, because eventually the Scottish Presbyterian Church was formed out of the Anglican Church, because they split away, just like we had a split in the church. Yeah. We had a traumatic fire here, a wildfire that burned, that we lost everything we owned practically. It burned 11 buildings, no, 126 buildings, condo buildings, 111 units, okay, in roughly less than 2 hours. It was a horrific fire. We went to the Irish Festival in North Myrle Beach for the day, and we came home, and I had moved my golf clubs from the car and put them in our den for the day. So we got home about 5 p.m. It was a nice day. It was about 80 degrees at 5 o'clock, and it was still sunny, but the wind was gusting, like 30 miles an hour. And so the first thing when we got home, Mary said, "Get those golf clubs of yours out of my den." So I had a glass of water and my golf clubs, and I walked down the stairs, opened the trunk of the car, and I put them in. And as I put them in, I looked over to my right, and there was a power line there, and I could see smoke drifting down. And there was a guy walking with his cell phone and dog just walking past the building, and he got out the end of the building. He said, "We got a fire." He said, "Should we report it?" And I said, "Absolutely." Well, he had a cell phone, and so I went out in where the power line was, where the fire was coming down. And so he dialed 911, and they asked 3 questions. How much is burned? So I gave him the answer. I said, "I can't tell you. There's too much smoke, but I'm guessing 100 feet or so." They said, "Okay, how high is the fire?" I said, "Oh, it's only about 6 inches high." And then they said, there's another question, which I can't recall now. Anyway, so then that was the 911 operator. They gave him the fire department, but they gave him the wrong fire department. They gave him the Myrle Beach fire department. They asked the same questions, and when they came to how high is the fire, I said, "Oh my God, it's 6 feet high and it's coming fast." Yeah, well, it was. So I ran back, and I set a glass of water on the stairs, and I went running up the stairs. I told Mary. I opened the door and I said, "Mary, we got a fire. You got to get out right now." Then I went to the other 7 units. Well, not all 7, but I got 5 other residents out, alerted them, banged on their door. I felt bad about one woman. She was just moving in that day. She'd been moving in for weeks with clothes, bringing them in. And that day she's moving furniture in with the help of another man. And they went, and I banged on their door, and there was a bureau chest of drawers sitting there right outside the door. And I said, I'm sorry, you gotta leave right now. So they came all running out, and we had to move our cars. The fire was coming across the lot, so we drove our cars, got in our cars, drove down, and parked them on the next block. Came jogging back, expecting to be Mary. No. I get back and close to the building, and I see her. She's walking down the stairs. There were 2 rails, and the fire is at about 1.5 feet over her head, up both on those rails. It's going right up the building. So anyway, on the way, we watched the building burn. On the way driving over to our friends to stay overnight in North Myrtle, I said to her, 57 years ago, you took marriage vow to love, honor, and obey. Obviously, you missed the obey part. Anyway, we stayed overnight, and our medicine and everything burned. And we both were on high blood pressure medicine. And so we went to church the next day, got up, we went to church. We were ushering. No, we weren't ushering. And I gotta say that that's when I really began to know that we had made the right choice moving to this area. The community of Myrle Beach, North Myrtle Beach, the church, even the high school students gave so much. They all pitched. The church took up a collection for Mary and I. Mary and I were ushering one day in church after the fire. Well, first let me backtrack just a little. The day of the fire, we watched our condo, our building burn, and then I said, we got to get out of here. And we were the last car to get out by the regular exit. And we went over and stayed with friends in that condo unit that they owned where we had rented. Jewish couple that was very nice to us and have been over the years. That shows me, and I had a very close Jewish friend in high school that I played football with. And so I strongly believe in the Jewish Christian faith. But we went to church, and right after communion, we took communion, and then we got up to leave because we found out we could get emergency medication at the drugstore. There were no drugstores open after the fire except one down south of Myrle Beach somewhere. They all closed at 6 o'clock. So we went out of the church. One lady, she's a snowbird, and she came running out. She and Mary had sort of a jacket competition about who could get a nice jacket. We had our clothes on that we had gone to the Irish celebration on. Green shirt, green outfit. She took her jacket off this lady and put it on Mary's shoulder. I'm telling you, that brought tears to my eyes. I'm thinking, take the shirt off your back. Right? But anyway, following up with that, the church was so generous, they took up a collection of, I think, around $3,000 for us. Money was given to us, some money by Red Cross. They opened a warehouse where we could go in and pick up supplies, some clothing and so forth. They're down toward the airport. Even one bar here, local, I've never been in it, didn't know anything about it, but they took up a collection for us, and there were 111 fire victims, individuals. They gave each one of us $50. The local high school drama club, they had just given a musical show for the year. They put on an extra show, and they ended up giving each one of us $100. High school students. Yep, that's really convinced me this is a loving community.